Welcome everyone. Welcome to another video from Kundu Academy. So today we are going to learn about how to draw a phylogenetic tree or cladogram. So basically in real life what we actually do, we have to consider lots of species at a time, and we have to analyze their molecular basis and we have to analyze their genetics. Now what that means basically, like we have to analyze molecular basis. In molecular basis we actually study their proteins, then consensus part means conserved part in protein, and we also have to analyze their genetics. But in general, in exams, we have to consider two factors to draw a phylogenetic tree. Now what are those factors? The first one is derived traits. And the second one is speciation event. Okay. Now what are the traits? Now let's say we have some common thing with fishes. Okay, so fish is also play as an ancestor of us. So let's say fish uses gills for respiration, but human uses lungs. Okay, so these two things are called traits, and when human evolved from the fish, the human derived or they acquired the lungs. So this is called the derived traits, and derived traits leads to speciation. Like we acquire lungs, that's why we get differentiated from the fish. And like human and us basically have 4 chambers in heart, whereas the fish have 2 chambers and amphibian have 3 chambers. So by creating one extra chamber from amphibian, we became human. Okay, so in my previous video I talked about the phylogenetic tree basics and the components of the phylogenetic tree and the cladogram. So you can check out that video. I will give that link in my description. Okay, now let's talk about the phylogenetic tree. Let's assume we have species like A, B, C, D, E. We have 5 species. Sorry, let's write it here. And we have derived traits in x-axis. Now let's assume derived traits are alpha, beta, gamma, delta and epsilon. Okay, now species A doesn't have any of these traits, but species B, C, D and E, this all 4 have alpha in common. Okay, now from BCEDE in future CDE derived beta as a trait. Okay, now in future from CDE only D and E acquired or derived the gamma feature. Okay, now from DE, D derived, let's say, F sigma, and E derived delta. So data will be given like this, and from this chart we have to draw the phylogenetic tree. Okay, now we assume the phylogenetic tree as the rooted one. So here is the root goes, and as we can see the A doesn't contain any of these 5 traits, so we will place A as outgroup. Okay, now let's say the B, C, D and E, these 4 have alpha in common. So from this ancestor along the time the alpha trait derived, and after acquired the alpha trait, speciation event happens and B species generated. Okay, so and along the time CDE acquired beta trait. So beta trait acquired, and C doesn't contain, and C only contained alpha and beta. So from here this species will be C, and after C, D and E both acquired gamma as a trait. So gamma trait acquired. Okay, here's the point of the DE ancestor. Now from D and E, D derived sigma but E derived delta. Okay, so from this point, let's say D speciation happened, let's say E speciation happened, and E gained delta as a trait, and D gain sigma as a trait. Okay, now as we can see, A doesn't contain any trait, so in line of the A there is no traits, but as you can see B, C, D, E, they all have alpha. Okay, so though in the base, in the bottom part, they acquired first, they all acquired alpha as a species, and B doesn't acquired any further trait, so B gets separated, B speciation happened. Now in further, beta trait acquired and C speciation happened, and like that E and D speciation also happened. Okay, now from this chart, as you can see, the trait alpha shared between these 4 species, but the trait delta and the sigma derived between sorry, the trait gamma derived shared between D and E, and delta only shared in E, or delta species only contained by E, and the sigma trait only contained by D. So from that we can say that traits carried out by least number of species is the most recent derived species. Most recent derived traits. So the species that contain this trait will tends to be the terminal species, and the traits that are carried out by most number of these species is the ancestral traits. So I hope you enjoy this video and learn how to draw a cladogram. So for today, that's it. Thank you for listening me. See you in the next video. Bye.